My family mocked my old clothes. They didn't know I was secretly funding their dreams when my grandson looked at my faded cardigan. He laughed. "Grandma, people probably think we're poor because of you." Everyone at the dinner table laughed. Even my own daughter smiled, but never defended me. I quietly looked down at my worn sleeves and kept eating. No one noticed. My hands were trembling. If they had opened just one envelope in my handbag, they would have discovered the truth every month. I was secretly paying for their dreams, and in less than 30 days, everything would change. My name is Margaret Hayes. I'm 72 years old. People who see me today think I'm just another lonely old woman. I wear the same old shoes, the same faded sweaters, the same inexpensive handbag I've carried for nearly 15 years. Most people assume I can't afford anything better. I let them believe it. Because appearances have never mattered to me. Family always did. After my husband passed away, I promised him something. No matter what happens, our children will never have to struggle the way we did. He squeezed my hand, smiled, and those were the last words we ever shared. From that day on, I lived as simply as possible. I stopped buying new clothes. I stopped spending money on myself. Every extra dollar went somewhere else. When my son couldn't pay his business loan, someone secretly paid the bank. That someone was me. When my daughter couldn't afford my granddaughter's university tuition, an anonymous payment arrived. That was me too. When my youngest grandson needed expensive medical treatment, the hospital suddenly received full payment. Again, it was me. No one ever knew. I wanted them to believe. Their lives were getting better through luck, not because of me. I never wanted praise. I only wanted to see them smile. But over the years, something changed. They became successful. They bought larger houses, luxury cars, expensive vacations, designer clothes. Meanwhile, I still wore the same old cardigan. The more successful they became, the more embarrassed they became of me. One Sunday, my family invited me to a large birthday dinner. I arrived carrying homemade apple pie, the recipe my husband had loved most. As I walked inside, my daughter whispered, "Mom, couldn't you have worn something newer?" Before I could answer, my grandson laughed loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Grandma still dresses like it's 1985. The room exploded with laughter. I smiled, pretending it didn't hurt. But inside, my heart broke a little more. None of them knew that the woman wearing old clothes was quietly holding together every dream they believed they had built alone. That night I went home, placed my old cardigan on the chair, and quietly cried. Not because they laughed, but because they no longer saw me as family. The next morning, I received 3 phone calls. The first, my son. "Mom, the bank approved my expansion. Looks like my luck is finally changing." I smiled. "I'm happy for you." He never knew. The approval letter only came because I had secretly paid the remaining balance on his loan the day before. An hour later, my daughter called. "Mom, Sophia got accepted into medical school." "I don't know who paid the tuition deposit, but we're so blessed." I looked out the window. "I know, you are." Then she laughed. "Maybe God sent us an angel," I whispered. "He already did." She never heard me. That evening, my youngest grandson posted family photos from the birthday dinner. Everyone looked elegant, designer suits, luxury dresses, expensive jewelry, but in every picture, I had been cropped out. as if I had never been there. Thousands of people liked the photos. One comment caught my attention. "Beautiful family," I smiled sadly. Beautiful, except for the grandmother. A week later, my daughter invited everyone to dinner again. This time, she handed me a shopping bag. I thought it was a gift. Inside was a cheap sweater. She smiled awkwardly. "Mom, please wear this next time. Your old clothes make people think we don't take care of you." The room became silent. I gently folded the sweater, placed it back inside the bag, and said softly, "My clothes may be old, but they've never embarrassed me. My children have." No one spoke. I stood up, picked up my handbag, and quietly walked toward the door. Just before leaving, I overheard my grandson whisper, "Grandma is so dramatic." They all laughed again. None of them noticed the legal envelope inside my handbag. Inside it was a document that would change every one of their lives, and in exactly 2 weeks, my family would discover who had really been paying for every dream they proudly called their own. 2 weeks passed. My family had no idea. Their lives were about to change forever. One rainy afternoon, I received a phone call from my lawyer. "Mrs. Hayes, everything is ready." I quietly smiled. "Thank you. It'll all be revealed soon." I hung up, looked at my late husband's photograph, and whispered, "I kept my promise." That evening, my son called. His voice sounded worried. "Mom, the bank says someone has been making payments on my business loan for years." "I don't remember authorizing it," I simply replied. "Maybe someone wanted to see you succeed." He laughed. "I wish I knew who." I smiled, but said nothing. The very next day, my daughter arrived at my house unexpectedly. She looked nervous. "Mom, I've been trying to find the person who paid Sophia's university fees. I want to thank them." I poured her a cup of tea. "Sometimes the people helping us don't want recognition." She nodded, but still didn't understand. As she prepared to leave, she glanced around my small home, the old furniture, the worn curtains, my faded clothes hanging by the door. She sighed. "I wish you had a better life." I smiled gently. "I already have everything I need." She hugged me quickly, then drove away. That night, I opened a wooden box hidden beneath my bed. Inside were dozens of receipts, bank transfers, tuition payments, hospital bills, business loan statements, every sacrifice, carefully organized, every dream, quietly funded, every receipt carried one name, mine. I closed the box, never imagining that someone had been standing outside my bedroom window, watching. The next morning, my eldest grandson knocked on my door. His face was pale. "Grandma, I think I've discovered your secret." My heart stopped. For the first time in years, someone was finally about to learn the truth. But what happened next was something none of us could have imagined. The truth finally came out. I looked at my grandson. His hands were shaking. "Grandma, I found these." He slowly placed a stack of bank statements on my kitchen table. I froze. The wooden box beneath my bed had been left slightly open. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "These payments, the business loan, Sophia's university, Ethan's surgery. You paid for all of them." I quietly nodded. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he began to cry. "I laughed at your clothes. I was ashamed of you. And all this time, you were taking care of us." I gently held his hand. "It's all right." "No, It's not. That evening, he asked one question. Can I tell everyone? I looked toward my husband's photograph, then softly replied, yes. The following Sunday, our entire family gathered for dinner, just like always. Expensive clothes, luxury watches, designer handbags. Everything looked perfect until my grandson stood up. I have something to say. Everyone turned toward him. He placed the bank statements in the middle of the table. My son frowned. What is this? My daughter picked up the first page. As she read, her face lost all its color. No, this can't be true. She grabbed another paper, then another. Every receipt, every payment, every transfer carried my name. The room became completely silent. My son slowly whispered, Mom, you paid my business loan? I nodded. My daughter began crying. You paid Sophia's tuition too? Again, I nodded. My youngest grandson looked at me in disbelief. And my hospital bills? You paid everything? Tears filled my eyes. I couldn't watch my family struggle when I had the ability to help. My son buried his face in his hands. I spent years thinking I built my success alone. But it was you. It was always you. Then my daughter looked at my old cardigan hanging beside the door. The same cardigan she had once been embarrassed by. She walked over, picked it up carefully, and held it against her chest. I'm so sorry, Mom. I judged your clothes, but I never looked at your heart. The room echoed with quiet sobs. For the first time in years, my family truly saw me, but they still didn't know. I had one final surprise waiting for them. The next morning, my lawyer called. Mrs. Hayes, the letters are ready. I smiled softly. It is time. Those letters would change my children's lives forever. A final gift. The next morning, my children arrived together, not in separate cars, not with excuses, together. For the first time in years, they knocked on my door instead of calling first. When I opened it, my daughter was already crying. She wrapped her arms around me. I'm sorry, Mom. I spent years looking at your clothes, but never looked at your sacrifices. My son stepped forward. His eyes were red. I called myself a self-made man. But every success I celebrated had your fingerprints on it. I smiled softly. I never wanted credit. I only wanted you to be happy. We sat together in the living room. The same old furniture, the same faded curtains, the same tiny house. They had once been embarrassed to visit. Then I reached into my handbag and placed 3 sealed envelopes on the table. Each envelope had one name written on it: Michael, Sarah, Ethan. My children looked at each other nervously. What are these? I smiled. My final gift. Michael slowly opened his envelope. Inside was a letter. He began reading aloud. My dear son, if you're reading this, it means you finally discovered the truth. I never paid your debts because you asked. I paid them because I believed in you. Even when you doubted yourself, promise me, from this day forward, never judge someone's worth by the clothes they wear. Some of the richest hearts hide beneath the oldest jackets. By the time he finished, he couldn't stop crying. Sarah opened hers next. Inside, along with my letter, was every tuition receipt I had ever paid for her daughter. She covered her mouth. I thought life kept giving us miracles, she whispered. You were the miracle. Ethan opened the final envelope. Inside was every hospital payment, every medical receipt, and one handwritten note. My sweet grandson, The only reward I ever wanted was watching you grow up healthy. That's worth more to me than every pound I ever saved." He fell to his knees beside my chair. "I'm so ashamed of myself, Grandma. I laughed at you. I judged you, and you never stopped loving me." I gently placed my hand on his head, because that's what grandmothers do. The room filled with tears, not tears of sadness, tears of understanding. For the first time, my family realized love doesn't always wear expensive clothes. Sometimes, love wears an old cardigan with worn sleeves and quietly sacrifices everything without asking for anything in return. As everyone sat in silence, my lawyer quietly entered the house. He smiled at me, then placed one final document on the table. "Mrs. Hayes, it's time." My children looked at the document, then looked back at me. None of them knew that the biggest surprise of all was still waiting to be revealed. The greatest inheritance. The room was completely silent. My lawyer slowly placed the final document on the table. "This," he said softly, "is Mrs. Hayes's new will." My children looked at one another. For years, they had believed this moment would be about money. They couldn't have been more wrong. The lawyer opened the document. "Mrs. Margaret Hayes has chosen not to leave her family wealth, but to leave them responsibility." My son frowned. "What does that mean?" The lawyer smiled gently. "Mrs. Hayes created the Hayes Family Hope Foundation, a charity that will pay university tuition, medical bills, and emergency housing costs for families in need." The room fell silent. He continued, "The majority of her savings have already been donated to establish the foundation." My daughter covered her mouth. "You gave it away?" I nodded. "I spent my whole life helping my family. Now, I want to help other families too." Tears streamed down my son's face. "What about us?" I smiled. "I've already given you everything. My time, my love, my sacrifices, my prayers. No inheritance will ever be worth more than that." Nobody could speak. Then my grandson slowly stood up, the same grandson who once laughed at my old cardigan. He walked over, knelt beside my chair, and gently held my worn hand. "Grandma, I finally understand. You were never poor. We were. We were poor in gratitude." The entire room broke down in tears. A few weeks later, the Hayes Family Hope Foundation officially opened. Families from across the country received help. Children returned to school. Parents paid their medical bills. Homes were saved. Every letter I received ended the same way. "You gave us hope." One afternoon, I visited the foundation. On the wall near the entrance balcony hung an old faded cardigan inside a glass display case. Below it, a small plaque read, "Never judge someone's worth by what they wear. The richest hearts often wear the simplest clothes." I smiled through tears. That old cardigan, the one everyone mocked, had become the symbol of hope for thousands of families. Months later, our family gathered again for Sunday dinner. This time, nobody cared what I was wearing. Nobody looked at my cardigan. Nobody noticed my old shoes, because they had finally learned to look at my heart. As my grandchildren laughed around the table, my daughter quietly whispered, "Mom, thank you for never giving up on us." I squeezed her hand. A mother's love doesn't stop, even when her heart is broken. I looked around the table. This wasn't the richest family in America, but it had finally become a grateful one, and that was the greatest inheritance I could ever leave behind. The end.